Thanksgiving podcast. Let's do this.
Yummy.
Welcome to the HACKADAY podcast. I'm Elliot Williams, editor-in-chief of HACKADAY.
And I'm Kristina Panos, assignments editor at HACKADAY.
This is episode 194. Today we'll be talking about the FPV contest, 7 words, lots of coffee, and edible drones. Let's see, starting off the news this week, we have the FPV contest. Starts, well, a couple days ago by the time you're listening to this. And this is a contest to basically put a camera on anything remote controlled and fly it, drive it, swim it around, and or improve the camera system.
Woo.
Do you have any FPV vehicles?
I do not. I'm not
What?
good at flying things at all.
You don't need to fly things.
But I'm not good at things like that. It's not going to go well. I'm going to crash it.
A couple years ago, I started flying FPV airplanes, and I've played around with quads. But the funny thing is, these systems are so cheap these days. Like, you can get a camera for $7, $10 on AliExpress, and a cheap pair of box goggles for $50, and there you go.
Oh, wow.
Like,
Okay.
you're set up. That's the whole deal. And the really funny thing is those little cameras are, 5 grams, 9 grams. They weigh nothing. With the transmitter, like, you just put a lightweight battery on that thing and put it on something, and you're off to the races. And so my son had like a little toy remote control car, and we're like, oh, let's put it on there. And we'd put it on the top just with some tape, right? We're driving it all around and under the sofa and stuff. It was really pretty awesome. That was like our first totally ad hoc experiment, and it was so much fun. I think everybody should play around with it.
Well, maybe I'll give it a try.
Surely you have some kind of remote control car kicking around.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, see? You can, on the other hand, go the other way and spend $1 million on a fancy setup. And if you actually fly a lot, getting nice goggles is nice. But is it necessary? No, not at all.
Yeah, I bought 3 guitars so far this year. That's probably not happening.
Yeah, well, that's a better way to spend your money anyway. But those of you out there who do have the gear, enter in this contest. It's the usual deal. There are 3 $150 DigiKey gift certificates, shopping sprees available to the winners. And basically, we want to see whatever it is you can build, whether it flies, drives, swims, any combination of the above. Walks, I guess. Wow, why don't we have FPV walkers in there?
I don't know.
Maybe we will. Maybe someone will do it.
I want to see what it's like to be a strand beast.
Oh, see? Now there you go. That's a good winter project, too. Give you something to do when it's cold outside.
Good for the newsletter, too.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I saw what you did in the newsletter.
Oh, that was Tom's. That was Tom's.
Oh, this was Tom's newsletter?
Yeah,
Jeez. He has like 100,000 FPV things in the newsletter this week.
Yeah.
Check out the HACKADAY.io newsletter if you want to be inspired.
You should check it out anyway.
This is true. Even if you don't want to be inspired. Second thing I wanted to talk about super briefly, open source passive radar taken down for regulatory reasons. This is the Kraken SDR project, which is really cool. It basically takes 5 RTL SDRs, puts them together on one board, and synchronizes them with one time source. And that's actually the gimmick here. Because they're all exactly in the same phase, it lets you do like phased array kind of stuff with them. And that is awesome. It opens up radio direction finding and beam forming and stuff like this. But also, at least on the software side, opens up passive radar. So it's like radar, except instead of emitting the pings yourself, you're just using like radio stations or Wi-Fi beacons or whatever else in the environment to bounce off the object and figure out how far it is, where it is away from you. I mean, on one hand, this sounds super awesome and super high tech. And on the other hand, it's so super awesome and super high tech that it's actually kind of a controlled military secret. And exporting these from the US to other countries is probably in violation of ITAR, which is the International Trade in Arms R, whatever the R stands for. Regulation regime. So the Kraken SDR folks are trying to figure out if what they're doing is within the law or not. But I went and actually looked at the ITAR stuff, and they're pretty much spang in the middle of in terms of the frequency band they use and the resolution they have. They are dead in the middle of the ITAR sites for things that are capable of doing passive radar.
Oof.
Now, it's not the only thing their board does, and this is kind of the bummer, because this is like an awesome, like, general purpose radio hacker tool. But yeah, it does look like they're going to have to at least think about this a little bit. That's pretty cool. I just think it's really awesome when a hacker project can end up being so sophisticated that it runs into problems with like international trade in arms requirements. So, good on them. I mean, that's the sign that it's a really cool project, right?
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't say I've ever had that problem myself. Nothing I've ever done has been, illegal to export because it's so cool.
Well, keep working at it.
This is a journey into sound.
What's that sound?
What's that sound?
And you want to move on to What's That Sound?
Sure.
You've got a sound this week, right?
I do.
Woohoo! That means I'm going to go listen to it. Hold on a sec. Let me go find it. Okay, here goes. Oh. Crackly? Whoa, I'm going to have to listen to that again. Wow. What could it be? You're doing something up close to the microphone.
What could it be?
You're dropping BBs. No, it wasn't loud enough to be dropping BBs. It sounded more electronic too. I think it's not. I think it's
What could it be?
No, I think you stumped me this week. I think I have no clue. What is it?
I was
Wow, and you could actually get a sound off of that.
I had it right up next to I had to cut out a bunch of mic noise, but I managed to get some without mic noise.
Man, that is fantastic. Okay, cool. Well, if you are listening out there and you have a clue what this is, head on over to hackaday.com/podcast. Fill out the form, give us the handle you want to be called on the air and your best guess at what this sound is. And we will pick one lucky winner from the right answers next week. Roll the dice and, happy Thanksgiving. You'll get a t-shirt. All right, off to the hacks. My first one is spoofing LiDAR could blind autonomous vehicles to obstacles. Now, this one was actually a longer piece written by Lewin Day, but I wanted to cover the hack inside it. And this comes from a bunch of researchers at the University of Florida and the University of Michigan. Their work here is basically to shine a laser at the rotating LiDAR rangefinder sensor on top of an autonomous vehicle and to shoot the laser at it at just the right time to make it think that it's a received pulse. So LiDAR works like sonar and like radar, except it works with lasers, and it shoots the laser out, does a time of flight on the reflected returned laser pulse, and figures out how far away whatever it is. What they're doing is they're kind of getting in the middle of those and shooting their laser back at it faster than the returned reflection, and then convincing the LiDAR unit that there's something there, but it's too close, actually. And then it just throws the data away and says, that has to be a spurious bounce. That can't be right. They've got a photo detector that tells when the laser scanning beam goes by them, and then they kind of just vary the delay there to this laser that then they shoot back at the LiDAR unit. This is one of those things where it's a really sweet hack, but I don't think it would translate much out of the lab situation because A, they have to be able to hit this LiDAR unit kind of right in the lens to make it work. So, if the car is moving or rolling or if, bouncing or, whatever, it's going to be hard to hit it accurately enough, I guess. But it's just a really fun experiment. And then they push it on by running the data from the LiDAR through a whole bunch of obstacle detection models and stuff like that. And they show that this actually would work in a plausible, like, object recognition case to blank out objects. And of course, the most sinister thing you could do with this is blank out people crossing the intersection and make an autonomous car not see them and run into them. I think that's totally implausible in a real world, real attack setup, not just because it's hard to aim the laser, but also because real cars have multiple modes on them. Like they'll have an ultrasonic sensor up front, and they'll have, the Google and Waymo cars have like 4 or 5 LiDAR units on them. So they have kind of redundant detection. So you'd have to blank all of them out. At the same time, you'd have to spoof the ultrasonic. I mean, I'm going with don't be afraid of this, people, but isn't it a really cool hack?
But here's all the terrifying things you could do with it.
If you're a security researcher, it seems like you have to make up these horrible scenarios with what you could do with whatever the technology is that they're interested in playing with, right? Like, I don't know. If they're hacking a tea kettle, they have to find a way to make it burn your house down. And here they're playing around with LiDAR, and they have to make it, they have to find out a way that they can run somebody over with it. It just makes for bigger headlines. I'm not detracting from the hack. I think it's actually really, really cool. I just, that's what sells at security research, is the size of the danger. Anyway, it was really cool, and there's some good discussion about kind of safety and what should you do if the car sees a weird reading like this. Like, imagine that your LiDAR is telling you there's a person there and a person there and a person there, and then, oh my God, there's a total black spot here, and then there's a person there. Should the car be looking for black spots and saying, hey, I can't tell what's in front of me? And the answer, of course, is yeah. If the car has no idea what it's about to drive into, it probably shouldn't drive into it, right? Like, so there's kind of some, yeah. So this came out of one of the neat discussions in the comments that I guess they do this in airplanes, for instance, when planes often have redundant altimeters, and when the two altimeters don't agree with each other, they don't just pick one and give you the answer. They tell you altimeters are screwed up, and you have to then, as the pilot, figure out what's going on and not put the plane into the ground. And I think there's some kind of analog to that here. Like, if the LiDARs can't figure out what's ahead of them, they have to do the safe thing, which is to slow down / stop and say, hey, driver, can't figure out what's going on. Anyway, if that's what comes out of this research, then I think it's totally worth poking at these edge cases like this.
My first hack this week is Eric Sorensen's Pop Your Way to a Fresh Roast Coffee. Like many of us who enjoy the brew, Eric sort of slowly slipped into coffee snobbery by getting, better and better beans. Well, first of all, getting beans to grind at home is a big step. Mm-hmm. But the next big step is probably getting green beans and roasting them yourself, which is not difficult. I'm here to spread the word that all it takes is hot air and agitation. And there are a number of ways you can do it. One of the easiest ways you can do it is with a popcorn popper. So Eric has already figured this out, but he's also figured out that you have little or no control with the popcorn popper. And while it provides hot air and agitation, you don't get to control the how hot, and you don't get to control the how heavy the fan goes. So that's what Eric has done here. He started by modifying the popper and adding a thermistor to monitor the temperature of the coil and a thermocouple to check the chamber temperature, and built a controller with an Arduino Uno and a motor driver and a touchscreen. And now he can control pretty much everything that you would want to control. And it's all open source, and he really honestly gave really good instructions. So anybody who wants to do this themselves should find success with that, I would think. And you should do it because good coffee is part of a happy life.
True that. Yeah, a friend of mine turned me on to roasting my own coffee in the year 2000, actually. And I have been roasting my own ever since, the last 20-something years. There was a brief dark period when I just moved to DC and my stuff was in storage and I couldn't get it out to roast coffee. And I was like freaked out for a while. And then I found a really good coffee place that roasted coffee freshly and, down the street. And I just went to them until my stuff got out of hock. But other than that, I have roasted like every cup of coffee I've drunk in the last 20 years. Not true. If I'm outside the house, I drink whatever's around. I'm not like that. I'm an addict, not a snob. But but let me say, this is an awesome machine, and I like the idea in particular of measuring the temperature not just upstairs in by the beans, but also downstairs by the heater element and controlling that. And that's something I don't do in my coffee roaster and something I'm totally, totally jealous of.
Well, put it on the project list.
And in terms of user interface, I mean, this is a nice build. You've been roasting your own coffee too, though, right?
I have. It's quite fun.
Straight up air popper or?
Straight up air popper.
Right on.
For now. But yeah, I'd like to do something like this for sure. Yeah, another way you can do it is with a heat gun. And we've featured a number of roasters that use a heat gun. Some of them are wobble disc roasters. Some of them are not. Many of them have been built by one Larry Cotton. And I will be putting links in the show notes to many of these.
I'm not even sure what a wobble disc is. I'm going to have to look at this.
Serves to agitate the beans.
Ah, right. Yeah, I mean, the problem with mine, of course, is that, and the problem with the air popper ones in general, is that you have to push enough air through it that, it actually blows the beans around so that they agitate themselves. Fluidized bed roasting. And this one just puts a motor in there and woodgies them around. That makes a heck of a lot of sense because it means you don't have to push so much air through, which means you could probably get it hotter.
I wonder if you could use an air hockey table. A hot air hockey table.
Hot air hockey table. Oh, no way. Is Larry Cotton the guy who runs Sweet Maria's?
No way.
Way. Huh. Cool. That's the company I bought my first green beans from.
Me too.
Well.
And he runs the whole thing.
Shout out to Sweet Maria's.
Wow.
Going to his website/store is what got my friend Chip roasting his own coffee, and he's the one who got me roasting my own coffee. So it's all like indirectly his fault.
Definitely.
Small world, small world. All right, my next hack is another interest of mine is portable ESP32 RGB laser show has all the trimmings. And this is a year-long project by Core BB, who is a Chinese hacker in Guangzhou somewhere. The video is in Chinese. It has good English subtitles, so you don't have to worry about watching it. It's really cool. The basic tech here is that he's got an ESP32 that over I2S, which is normally used for music, drives DAC plus amplifiers to then turn the galvanometers, which are like these mirrors mounted on spinny magnets that aim the lasers. So he's got the power of an ESP32 upstream, which means he can send laser shows over Wi-Fi to this thing, and it's got plenty of speed to drive the DACs, and then the rest of it is just blinking the R, G, and B lasers on at the right time and steering the 2 degrees of freedom X and Y in the left and right audio channels by I2S. Now, there is a ton of interesting software backing this all up too, which I think is part of the fun of this project. You should head on over to his GitHub if you're interested in that. He's even got an app where you can draw something on your phone and send it to the laser display, and then it'll display it out for you. It's pretty slick. At the end of the day, the unit here is SLA printed, and it's kind of 6 inches by 6 inches by 6 inches cube, and it's run on batteries, so it's also totally portable, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, this is kind of a 300 milliwatt laser, and you should be careful about where you point it. And so that's kind of the downside of making it portable, is it makes it easy to like screw up and drop it on the floor and blind somebody. So don't do that. And in fact, we got into a little bit of a kerfuffle in the comments because he does mount it on his bike and go out driving around with it, which is kind of cool in a way. Like it shows his bike speed drawn out on the ground in front of him. But then because the tripod mount isn't very robust, it actually falls off of his bike. And A, he ends up breaking it. But B, that's that loose laser scenario again that you really want to avoid. Yeah, pros and cons to the portable laser show. But I could totally imagine being careful with this and setting it up outside, projecting it up against the wall of a house that doesn't have windows on it. And you could like do your own outdoor laser shows. And that would be really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go safety nanny on this one.
Go for it.
Yeah, I don't know about doing it out on the road. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably right. I mean, so Laser Safety 101 here, I've played around with them a lot and read up a lot. If you're like doing any of the cutting or engraving laser things, it really needs to be in a box. That's like the simplest way to make sure the beam never gets in anybody's eyes. And you pretty much need to put it in a box to vent the fumes anyway. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but I'm safety nanny with you as far as like the laser engravers go. Those like open laser engravers, really, they need a case. And like any serious laser cutter has a big box around it that's got interlocks that shut the laser off as soon as you open the door. And that's really the right way to go. You can't do that if you're setting up a laser show. And so if you go and read up on how to do a laser show safely, there actually is a ton of stuff. I think you can go look up the FDA's rules on how to run laser shows. You have to make sure that no one in the audience can come in contact with the beam, and you have to be really sure how you terminate the beam. That is, wherever it ends up, that it doesn't hit something reflective and bounce down at the people in the audience and stuff like that. Yeah, don't blind yourself out there, folks. You've only got two eyes, and stereo vision requires both of them.
Yes. My next hack is Joe Scotto's colorful split keyboard uses VGA connections. Now that's pretty much what's going on here. However, this is not Joe's first keyboard. This is actually a redesign of an earlier build called the Scotto Fly he built, which is a monoblock split with a big triangular void in the middle for holding your cup of snacks or whatever you want. It's not big enough for a mouse. And anyway... Joe was rummaging around in the basement and found a VGA cable and got inspired. And so decided to build a split keyboard version of the Scotto Fly using the VGA cable to connect the two halves. It actually proved to be difficult, and he thought it was because he coiled the cable and caused some of the wires to break in the process. And while that may have happened, that's not the big problem. It was actually worse. It turns out that the entire middle row of at least this particular VGA cable was wired to ground, so he had to redo some of the pins there. Fortunately, there were still enough pins to pass the small matrix, but that's a rough one. I probably would have given up before I figured out. Well, no, I say that, but
Nah.
I remember doing continuity tests on the cables that I built.
You would have beeped it out.
For my Dactyl.
Yep.
So I would have tried that at some point.
So wait, this isn't like one of those split keyboards where it's got two processors, one in each side.
It does not. Instead of having an I/O chip, an I/O extending chip, Joe just went with a cable that has enough wires to pass all the rows and column wires across to the side with the processor.
Hence the VGA.
Hence
I
the
see.
VGA.
I'm looking through the video right now. I like the way he did the wiring of the keys. If any of you out there have suffered through doing your own custom keyboard, like the trick is when you do this horrible matrix, making sure all the wires work. And he kind of uses thick, hard copper wire as like a bus bar or something going across.
Yeah, it's for both. He's got it isolated with heat shrink at the cross cross points.
Totally. Oh, that's cool. That's nice. I just did it with like regular. I mean, I use solid core wire, so it's kind of solid, but this is even beefier and probably easier to solder to.
I couldn't find thin enough, and I went with stranded, but then on one side I used copper tape
Oh, right? Okay.
for the columns.
Yeah.
You know, I poked it over the leads and then soldered it,
Oh, that's an awesome idea.
and I stole it from somebody, but it works pretty well.
I never heard about that. That's a great idea.
Nice and flat.
Yeah. Ah, super. I like this one too. It kind of looks like circuit sculpture on the back a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, my next hack, reverse engineering the 7 words and more you can't say on TV, is kind of a twofer. The hack we wrote up is Ben Eater's reverse engineering the, quote, TV Guardian foul language filter, which is pretty awesome. Ben Eater found out about this by watching a video on technology connections about the TV Guardian. So you can actually go watch that one too. And basically he got nerd sniped into reverse engineering this thing when Alec was like, I don't know what all of the bad words that are on this thing are. That's your clue. So Ben takes the device apart. It's actually a really simple reverse engineering, and for that reason alone, it's really great to watch. Ben makes wiring up entire computers on a breadboard look easy. So you know when he has something that's a little bit easier, it's going to make for a really nice video. The long and the short of it is there's a PIC on this board. There's a closed caption decoder and encoder chip, and then there's an EEPROM that turns out to have all of the memory with all of the bad words and then what the bad words should be turned into listed on it. And so PIC reads from this, looks through the stream of closed captioning going through, replaces it with the sanitized words. So instead of like saying ass, it says behind or something. I'm actually not going to go through the list on the radio here, except to point out, as Dan does in his write-up, it's absolutely worth pointing out that it also has whitelisting functions in it. So like it has to let butter through without turning it into behinder, right? And so it's got all these funny little codings to avoid this. And it has a special whitelisting for Dick Van Dyke. Whose name, if it were not whitelisted, would come out Jerk Van Gay because of the way it processes things. Anyway, it's really fun if you got the reference to the George Carlin sketch in the title. That and this reverse engineering dissection here are both kind of interesting sociological studies into what people are offended by. But it's pretty funny. I actually was watching the whole video waiting to see what they would do with the F word, because I watched Die Hard when I was a kid, and this is still stuck in my head. When he's like at the end of it, he's like, yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon. And I was just, we watched this over and over again because it was so hilarious. And I actually still call people Mr. Falcon to this day. Listen up, Mr. Falcon.
Oh, I think my favorite is Mother, Father, Chinese Dentist.
It's actually kind of a cool encoding. You know, Ben Eater does not shy away from reverse engineering problems. He actually goes through, there's a little binary code after the words that says whether it's a replaced word, and it says which of the replacement words it maps to and all of that. And he not only dumps the EEPROM with an Arduino, I should add, dead simple, writes a small program, dumps it with the Arduino. He also completely figures out what each and every bit does. Lovely reverse engineering, totally good laugh, and a ridiculous device.
So as far as I can tell, this next hack is credited to the Gajuino project, and that name comes courtesy of Gaggia espresso machines. And much like the whole use of a popcorn popper for roasting green coffee beans that we discussed earlier, entry-level Gaggia espresso machines don't offer a lot of control over things like the heat and the pressure, or they don't offer a lot of insight into things like the pressure. This project is a modification that is good for a handful of different Gaggia models, and essentially uses a K-type thermocouple and a pressure sensor to provide closed-loop control. And there's also load cells attached to the drip tray, so you can monitor your brew based on pour weight versus just like timing the shot. And as you may have guessed, it's run by an Arduino, and obviously it's open source. So if you have such an entry-level Gadget machine and you long for more control, you should give this a shot. Pun absolutely intended.
Oh, boo.
But accidental, but intended. Intended after the fact.
That's awesome. This was my first espresso machine, believe it or not. I had one of these a million years ago. I've actually since given it to my parents, and I think they're still running it. Like you said, it doesn't have any control. Like, you turn it on and it kind of heats the water up and, it pumps it out, but no real control over any of the pressure or any of the rest of it. The pump, the boiler. You just kind of press the buttons and it goes. So this is really, really cool. It turns it into a fancy, fancy coffee machine.
That's a great logo, that bendy guy.
Italians, man, their design. I think this is the fancier machine than mine, because I think this one has like yet one more control than mine does. Mine only has 2 buttons on the front, but mine doesn't have any fancy graphics on it.
Oh.
It just says I think it's called the Max or something. It's the Gadget Max, and then I named my son after it.
I was just going to say.
No, I didn't. It's a total coincidence. or maybe that's just, how much water you're supposed to put into it. Maybe it just says Max there. Huh. It might be called the Classico or something. We'll have to look this up later. I don't care. Anyway, I gave it to my parents. They're using it.
Why are you staring at the juice, Elliot? Well, it says concentrate.
Exactly. All right, I will lead off my quick hacks this week with work from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. I can't tell if they're kidding or not. They've basically built a super light drone airplane that's supposed to be for like search and rescue missions, except the wings are made of laser cut rice cake hexagons all kind of assembled together. The idea is you could fly it up there to a person stuck on the side of a mountain and they can eat the wings.
I love it.
My first thought is if you put real wings on the thing, it could probably carry more weight.
Yes.
And then my second thought is rice cakes have to be like made in some kind of pressy mold anyway. You could actually press them into airfoils and then you could have entirely edible rice cake wings.
For the person, right?
For the person stuck on the side of the mountain. I mean, they're putting St. Bernard's out of a job. I don't know how I feel about that. Next up, this standalone camera gets the picture through with SSTV, and that is slow scan TV, which is an old ham radio mode. DZL, the evil genius, has hacked an ESP32 cam module to do pulse width modulation to send this analog signal out to a Baofeng radio that then sends it to whatever it is he's using to receive it. Standard SSTV receiver. Looks really good, and it's a cheap and easy and cool and low-tech way to get very slow frame rate pictures out to, you could send them across the world with very little infrastructure. And last up, Stefan from CNC Kitchen. Move aside, planer. I'm slicing my cone way. We've talked a lot about non-planar slicing, and Stefan's even done a couple videos on it. This is his latest, and he's been working on the code that was provided to him by the people at some Zurich Technical University that had been doing the main research on this. And here in this video, he has basically kind of demonstrated how simple it is to do this sort of thing. You don't need a special rotating head. You don't need anything. You just need to figure out kind of the clearance angle off of the head of your 3D printer, and you can experiment with non-planar / cone sliced 3D printing, which lets you print overhangs without any support.
My first quick hack comes from the Q. Crazy bike frame made out of 147 nuts. And interestingly enough, they're not all the same size. They are different sizes, and they are all tack welded together into a bike frame. Now, importantly, some of the more businessy parts of the bike are not made of nuts. They're made of sheet steel and steel tubing. But after it was assembled, it was all painted gray to be more uniform, I suppose. And then it was given some mountain bike tires, which what else would you... I would think that would be the minimum of tire that you would want on a bike like this. Because it's going to be rigid, right? It's not going to have a lot of give. As Lewin points out in the write-up, wouldn't want to push it too hard over bumps and jumps because it could fall apart. But it does look very cool. It looks very cool. And also, as Lewin points out, there are many, many places to attach a lock. Next up is Shinsaku Haira's faceless clock. Makes you think twice about how it works. This faceless clock, well, faceless is kind of a misnomer. It's a hollow clock. You can put your finger through it from front to back like one of those bladeless fans. But how? How? Well, the secret is, are you ready? That the minute hand is connected to the rim. Aha, look at that. And the rim moves around. But what about the hour hand? It appears to truly float, but it's magnets in the rim. Yeah, but boy, it sure looks really cool, doesn't it?
That's awesome.
Last up, we have Frains. See the forbidden cigarette machine in action. Now, this is a very, very cool cigarette stuffing machine. Now, you may not think that those words go together, because cigarettes themselves are bad for you. But as a former smoker who contemplated rolling her own and never did because, I don't know, I was too addicted to the rat poison and junk that was in my brand, I guess. Everything about the design of this, there are a ton of little things to like because just from like the revolver aspect of the empty cigarette tubes. So essentially there's a hopper for tobacco, loose tobacco, and a hopper for empty cigarette tubes with filters in them. And there's a 6-shooter type cassette for the empty tubes. And they spin around and one goes into place and it gets opened by this kind of oblong cut brass tube that holds the paper open while it gets stuffed. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch. And like Elliot says in the write-up, you're going to learn a lot just by watching the thing come together. And it does work really well. At the very end, spoiler alert, Frains peels back the paper from one, peels a strip down the length of it, and you can see it's very well packed. But not, so well packed that you won't get airflow through it. Just a very cool machine. It's amazing to think about the delicate degree to which you have to stuff a paper tube, but to do it quickly and accurately. And yeah, it's just amazing.
Now it's time for our can't miss articles. These are long form pieces written by our fantastic HACKADAY staff. This week I'm going to pick Al Williams's Don't Believe Everything You Read, The Great Electric Toaster Hoax. And this is just such a great story, even though it ends up making me a little bit sad because it's a story about deception on Wikipedia, my favorite source of truth? ? Anyway, let's talk about the Great Toaster Hoax. Alan and his friend Alex are in class, and one of their teachers says, "You can't use Wikipedia as a source. I could just go in there and edit something. Like, I could say that I invented the toaster." And one of the two of them, Alex, is like, "Hey, that's funny. Let's go do that." And he edits his friend Alan McMasters' name in as the inventor of the toaster. And this somehow goes unnoticed for a while and actually gets picked up by the press. And the two pranksters notice this and they're like, "Ooh, well, let's double down now." And so Alan makes himself a Wikipedia page, Alan McMasters, where he claims to be an 1890s Scotsman who invented the electric toaster. And it's, of course, got his whole bio there. And it's got the worst photoshopped picture of somebody I've ever seen. It's got like this super bad tear line on the bottom of it to make it look old, and it's kind of sepia toned. And the real reason they did that tear was because he was wearing normal 2000s clothing, and they had to take that off so they couldn't put it in the Wikipedia hoax. They left it, even though it looked like crap, because they figured that would make it more obvious that it was a joke. But they kept embellishing on this for a long time, and it got picked up both by some TV shows and the Scottish government's Brand Scotland website and a whole bunch of things, as well as kind of being an underground meme, and people wrote stories about him and jokes and etc. All the fun would eventually come to an end when a schoolboy from Kent notices that this picture is just totally implausible, reports this to Wikipedia. Wikipedia says, hey, wait a minute, this is totally fake. Cleans the whole thing up, and boom, within 24 hours, Wikipedia is fine again. Al uses this to kind of ruminate on, what's the source of truth. If you have a website like Wikipedia where anyone can edit it, then you kind of rely on having a whole bunch of people looking at a story. So if you're talking about kind of an obscure corner of Wikipedia, like the Alan McMaster's entry that nobody's going to look at unless they've heard of this guy before, yeah, it's not going to get scrutinized like something more mainstream, like, the entry for Doom or something. That's what happened here, is that this hoax persisted for 10 years. 10 years without being corrected. And then, of course, as soon as it did show up, boom, done, fixed. I don't know. I kind of take this actually to be a good sign about the health of Wikipedia. Like, I mean, somebody did create a prank like this, and it did make misinformation that unfortunately fooled, some real world concerns. But it also kind of got fixed up as soon as it was possibly noticed. And
because there's people looking out.
And so somebody saw it and somebody fixed it. And so there's kind of an eventual correctness of Wikipedia that I kind of still will stick by.
Works for me.
What do you think? Wikipedia is a source of truth?
I mean, not Wikipedia itself, but the sources. Wikipedia is a starting point, sure, but the sources for actual sources. For the bibliography.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably what fell down on this, right? Is that nobody looked at this guy as the inventor of the toaster and flagged it as citation needed.
Yeah.
Somebody should have put a citation request in for that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And do note that Wikipedia rules don't allow Wikipedia to be used as a citation within Wikipedia because they're not dumb. They got that one solved already. It has to be outside and it has to be a reliable source. Which, by the way, if any of you out there at Wikipedia/Wikimedia/ the general public are listening to this, HACKADAY is a blog, and Wikipedia says blogs are not reliable sources of information. So boo.
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 Yes.
And also, our Wikipedia page is totally crusty and old, and nobody has fixed it up. And we, of course, don't want to do it ourselves. But if any of you out there want to go revamp the Wikipedia page on HACKADAY for us,
in a good way,
we wouldn't stop you.
Don't be naughty.
Yeah, don't write that we invented the toaster. We don't want that. Anyway, there's also an awesome picture here of the actual first electric toaster.
Oh, yeah.
Which was invented in 1909 by Frank Schuyler, and he's got the patent for it. So, A, you can check it out, but B, it's basically just a bunch of coils and a loose frame around them. This is definitely the electrocution risk version of the toaster, and it also only toasts on one side at a time, so you have to flip your toast over.
Yikes.
But I guess that's how life was back in the day. People made toast over open flames before this. So, you get burned either way.
We still make marshmallows that way, or I do.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
Looking at this, I actually want to make a reproduction of one of these toasters because it's just so awesome looking.
Oh, please do. Yeah, like a circuit sculpture version.
It looks like that's what it is. It's like a circuit sculpture version of a toaster. You got it. That's exactly what this is.
It reminds me of an electric, part of an electric substation, too.
Yeah, right? That's because it's on this awesome, ceramic base, right? To insulate it from burning your table down. But it's also gilded and, people don't make things like they used to. It's got this ceramic base with gold around the edges just because it looks sweet. We got to make one of these.
Okay.
The most dangerous toaster.
You just hang it in that little ledge?
Yep.
Like a piece of glass on a glass truck or something? Okay.
Lean your toast up against the heat.
Okay.
Doesn't go ding when your toast is ready. That's on you too, I guess.
Yeah,
With great toasting power comes great toasting responsibility.
for sure.
Should I confess this on the air? I actually committed my own Wikipedia hoax when
What?
I was a young sprat. Sometime back in, let's say 2004, I actually edited the Wikipedia entry on Doom, the video game, and I put a naughty word in there to see how long it would last. And it was cleaned up within 2 hours. It was gone. It had disappeared. Someone had either seen it or they have a bot looking for mildly dirty words or something like that. I mean, we were going to clean it up after ourselves anyway. We're not, total jerks. But the question was, how good is Wikipedia at cleaning itself up from minor vandalism? And the answer is extremely good, at least way back in the day.
Depends on the article.
Yeah, we picked Doom. That was probably a fairly well-viewed article too, huh?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Should probably have picked something a little bit further out of the mainstream.
GoldenEye.
I think it was actually a bet. I said I thought it would get cleaned up pretty quick, and Ted said it wouldn't. And I think I was right in the end.
Nice. Take that, Ted.
Take that, Ted, if you're listening.
For my can't miss this week, I chose my very own Will the Fax Machine Ever Stop Singing? The impetus for this article is that the UK removed a provision in their universal service type legislation, which basically is like in the US. It ensures that everybody has access to communication tools that they can afford and at an affordable level. But they decided to remove the provision for facsimile services, and they gave the public about a month to complain, and very few people did, but those who did pointed out that it's still in use in several fields, like the medical field, legal, energy. So they looked into this and decided that, yeah, they still use them, but they're getting away from it, so we're going to take it out. But the issue here is that because we're moving toward IP telephony all the way, the fax machine won't work the same way, and presumably they don't want to update the fax machines or update the system to handle it. And we had a lot of comments that I haven't used a send a fax since 1990, whatever, but I worked in telecommunications for almost 20 years, and what I did was I ordered circuits from carriers, big carriers like AT&T and MCI WorldCom and Verizon, for smaller telephone companies across the United States, across the world. I got faxes all the time. Like our MCI WorldCom actually would send when you got an order number and a circuit ID for your new circuit, they would just send you a fax, and that's way easier and faster than getting an email, opening it up, printing it out. Like, oh, hey, got a fax. It's like all at once. You get the news, you get the goods, you get something to put in your folder, because we kept paper records for everything in case we needed them, because we always had to be able to call out circuits that went down no matter what was happening. I've definitely used a fax a lot, and I'm not that old.
Fond memories of the fax machine.
Darn it, yeah.
Yeah.
And I love somebody's story about getting back at a spammer by making a fax loop.
Okay.
That's saying basically, just like sending a couple sheets through and then taping them together. So it's just it's a loop that says, take us off your list. And they took him off the list finally.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps it up for this week's HACKADAY podcast. Thanks for listening. Happy Thanksgiving yesterday, by the way. If you want to check out the links or leave comments, head on over to the show notes, hackaday.com/podcast. And if you see anything cool or do anything cool, write us at the tips line, tips@hackaday.com. And until next week,
keep on hacking.
Shiitake mushrooms.
Yeah. Good enough for me.
Good enough for me.
Looking it up. Boom.
Transceiver. I'm going to say that with more conviction. Blah, blah, blah.
Can't miss.
Oh, we need more theme music.
When Black Friday comes, this podcast will come out.
Cyber Monday.